Hello everyone. So today we're going to talk about cellular. Write that better. I can talk about your cellular communication. Okay. Now it's very important. This is just an overview of the cellular communications that happens within the cell. So you have two types. Okay. So here, what we mean by cellular communication is that cells need to communicate because they live in a network of cells. So here imagine you have those cells, they live in a network of cells. These cells make up tissues, right? And then tissues makes organs and so on. Okay, so here they have to have a means of communication. So that's why here the two types are, you have your extracellular communication, okay? And then you have your intracellular communication, okay? So intra means inside the cell. Okay, extracellular is known, it's like outside of the cell. Okay, cellular means cell and then communication. So it's pretty self-explanatory, pretty simple. Okay, so here, your extracellular communication could be broken down to two types. Okay, now these are just the basics. This is just an overview, a bird's eye view of what's happening. We're not going to get to the details in this video. So here you have your direct extracellular communication, and you have your the second one is going to be secretions. Okay, so here we're going to have secretions that happens that allows us to transmit the signal between the cells. So here it's very important. Here we have something called the gap junction. Okay, so the gap junction, and that is in the direct extracellular communication. Now this happens when we have two cells that are side by side. So here have two membranes latching onto each other. They form this thing called a gap junction. Now if you zoom in next to a gap junction, it looks like this, right? Sometimes like this. This is the membrane of one of the cells. I'll just make it better. So this is going to be the membrane of one of the cells. It's going to be the membrane of the other. This is from the first cell. This is from the second cell. These parts right here, right? And so from here, these are made of something, these things called connexon. Connexon. Okay, these are made of these things. Of course, they open and close, letting stuff in and out. So, for example, if something dangerous happened in this here, those connexons gonna close, so preventing those damage or infections to transmit to the other cell. Okay, another thing that we have your secretions. So secretions, there's four types. You have your autocrine secretions, you have your paracrine secretions, there is the endocrine secretions, and there's the neurotransmitters. Okay, so paracrine secretions is when you have substances or signals coming from the cell. So it goes out from the cell and then it comes back to the cell. So you have receptors in the cell, they interact with these signals and they affect the cell. So same cell, or let's say here cell, and this is the effect. Okay, so you have your cell just like a table. So here from autocrine, so it's from the cell, so from one cell, and it affects the same cell. The paracrine comes from one cell, okay, and it affects nearby cells. Okay, so in this example, it could be like a cell that's over here and there's a cell over here, right? And so there's a certain distance, but they are nearby. They're not the same cell, but they're nearby. The second one, you have your endocrine. So this is from one cell to distant cells. Now this is distant cell, these are far away from each other. So we're talking about something like going through the bloodstream. Okay, so going through the bloodstream, we're talking about hormones. We're talking about stuff like that. So they pass through the bloodstream, right? So these are like the bloodstream here. So they pass through this bloodstream, and then they pass through a whole bunch of cells, but they don't interact with these cells until they see the cell that they want to interact with, because they have the same receptors that interact with these signals. They would interact in causing an intracellular response into that cell. The fourth thing that we have is the neurotransmitters, and these comes from the synapse, the synapse, and they affect. So we can say it comes from the pre-synaptic neuron, and it affects the post-synaptic neuron. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we have a synapse. So in the synapse, so let's say here, there is here, and then we have the other. So this, let's say this is the terminal end of the presynaptic neuron. Okay, and so what this is essentially this. So we have your neuron here, we have your dendrites, there's the axon, right? There's the myelin sheath that's surrounding the axons here, and there is your here coming out. So this is what's being projected over here. Okay, so this is projecting over here, and then over here we have a whole bunch of neurotransmitters. Okay, so these are neurotransmitters coming up here, and they go outside to bind to the dendrites. Now this is another neuron, okay, which is going to have receptors that's going to respond to these signals. This is your here, let's say. So what this is, so if you have a different neuron, and then we have your dendrites here, this here, this is your terminal ends, right? So this is the terminal end is right here, or this is, so this is going to be this side over here, so this is going to be projection over there. All right, of course you have your myelin sheath for both of them, but what's essentially called, so this one that is giving off the neurotransmitters, this is the presynaptic neuron, and what's receiving, this is the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, receiving the neurotransmitters, of course, going through, lynching off these. Okay, but this gap right here, this is called the synaptic gap or the synaptic cliff. Okay, cleft. The synaptic gap or the synaptic cliff, and that is how a means of transmitting neurotransmitters. All right, so this is very important when it comes to neurotransmitters. Now, an example of neurotransmitters could be like dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, GABA. So these are all examples of neurotransmitters that could pass through. The second thing that we can talk about here is the inside. So this is your intracellular response. Now, there's a lot of detail that goes into the intracellular responses, so maybe we're not going to go over all of these through the video, but it's very important to understand there's a signal, okay, then there's a receptor, then there is a signaling protein. The signaling protein turns on your second messengers, and then your second messengers turns on your effectors. Let's write it this way, effectors. Okay, those effectors, they do the response. So here, the intracellular responses is that you have a signal, just like one of these signals. Okay, so you have like one of these signals comes in. So here it could be, we call a signal a ligand. It's any substances that comes in. Then you have a receptor. This receptor, most cases, it's in the membrane, or it's inside the cytoplasm. Okay, so it's in the membrane or inside the cytoplasm. So for example, you have your G protein coupled receptors. So these are a type of receptors that are found um, in the plasma membrane. Now, of course, here it's very important to understand the relationship between structure and function. So there's an important relationship here between structure and function. After that, you have your signaling protein. Signaling protein is the result of the interaction between your ligand and the the receptor. So here I have a receptor, so it would release a signaling protein. Now this signaling protein, in this case, you have your GABA, you have your beta, and you have your alpha. These are the G proteins. They interact with each other. Once you have a ligand, conformation change happens to the G protein coupled receptors, and then you have your the A gets out of the system. So you have your A by itself, and then we're left off with we're just left off with the B and the Y. So that's the beta and the gamma. Okay, so that's this. And after that, reaction goes on happening, and this produces. So from here, this produces your. So it's a conversion. So it converts ATP to CAMP, right? So this happens because it releases a signaling protein. Now, what is that signaling protein? It's adenylyl cyclase, and these play an important function in amplifying the signal that's coming in. So here we have a signal. So that's this, the ligand, also called the first messenger. First messenger. Okay, and so this is the first messenger. Now I have the second messenger. Okay, it also amplifies. So this is very important. Why is that very important? First, it amplify the signal. So these two amplify the signal. Also, there's a lot of second messengers that can be produced inside of the cell. So the cell does not need much of energy to produce a response, right? Because they don't need much energy because there's a lot of them. It's more efficient to produce them to elicit the response. After that, we have an effector. Now, effector is something that could help to elicit the response, responding to the signal. So there's a signal coming up, telling the cell to do something, change its function, do a special task, and so we do all these steps to get to the effector, which is can respond. So there's an effector. You have your nuclear effector. So this is one example. So this gets into the nucleus. Okay, interacts with, for example, steroids. There's a steroid element inside of the nucleus, right? So this nuclear effector interacts with these inside here, and those could interact with the real DNA, causing a transcription factor. So change in transcription, right? To have an effect on transcription. Okay, so this is just an overview, basic overview of the cell communication. Of course, there's a lot more detail going on to the intracellular communication, but we have covered extracellular communication in a bit of detail. Okay, hope this was helpful, and thanks so much. Have a good day.